And I don't think you really meant it.
Mr. Chair.
Louisa Wall.
Talofa lava, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koutou katoa. I just want to highlight that this part 5, 154 1A, provides for owners of Māori freehold land to appoint a governance body to manage the land on their behalf under a governance agreement. I have questions for the Minister in a couple of areas, and the first is section 158. 1F notes a representative entity, and then the relationship between 158 and then 158(1)F and then 158(3)B is about that representative iwi is recognised by the owners of the land as having authority to represent the hapu iwi. And my question really to the Minister is whether or not if a representative entity is sufficient, and in fact whether it should say an authorised representative entity. And the reason I bring it up is that is it possible to actually have recognised by the owners of the land more than one representative entity? And if that were ever to happen, I would really appreciate the Minister outlining the process to determine who was the legal representative entity, what process has to be gone through to discern who actually is the representative entity. So what is the mediation process? And in fact, could it end up with an entity going to court to determine that they are, in fact, the representative entity? I think if that was an outcome of the relationship between these two particular clauses, then that's not a good process, and that should be clarified, which is why I kind of highlighted whether F should say authorised representative entity, because then you've already taken care of the fact that they are the body that becomes the governance body. It's just a question, so I'm just wondering if the Minister or the officials have thought of that, and then what is the solution if it was possible for the recognised owners to actually end up having two different bodies having the authority to represent the hapu iwi. I also want to focus on section 189, so the court may appoint kai whakahaere, and the relationship between 189, I guess 190, 192 and 193, because essentially the kai whakahaere is required because there isn't a governance entity. And so in reading these sections, and I haven't really had a relationship with this bill, I want to acknowledge those on the Māori Affairs Select Committee who have, but one of the questions that has come to my mind is that it seems that the relationship between the Chief Executive of, what is the name of the entity? No, the Chief Executive that's of the Māori Land Service, thank you, in 193(2)A, the Chief Executive has a whole lot of power. So they're the ones that end up calling the owners together. They're the ones that end up writing a report, and it is through that mechanism that the court then determines who the kai whakahaere is. So that's the Chief Executive of a Crown entity who's acting on behalf of Māori. I don't think that's appropriate. Well, obviously the Minister does, but I'm just wondering about the independence between the Crown and the courts, and aren't they supposed to be independent? Well, the courts are supposed to be independent. So in fact what the courts will be doing is giving effect...
I am going to just interrupt the member. She's getting way ahead of herself. She's now talking about part 9, just about a whole...
No, 193.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that the dispute resolution process to which you do have to sit down.
Sorry.
The dispute resolution process to which she is referring and asking questions about is set out in part 9 of the bill.
I'm talking about section 193(2)A, which directs the Chief Executive to arrange in accordance with section 194 a meeting of the owners, and then they write a report. And if it's satisfied by the courts, that then determines who the kai whakahaere is. That's what I was highlighting. I was highlighting the fact...
I thought the member indicated she thought that was disputed. Keep going.
No. Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, can I have another call, please?
Yeah,
Mr Chair, thank you. So I do think, given the relationship between Māori, the landowners, the government, so the CEO of a Crown entity, and then the courts, actually creates a scenario where, in fact, it's the Crown and then the courts that are colluding with each other to some degree to then appoint a kai whakahaere who's supposed to represent Māori interests. Just from my perspective and the perspective of Māori, I think that they would find it abhorrent that actually the CEO can write a report that then enables the court, for all intents and purposes, to take the governing body out of their hands and put it into the hands of an entity that has been appointed by the CEO of the government department and the Crown. I actually think it's incredibly ironic. So it'd be really interesting for the Minister to kind of explain that philosophy, not only to us here in the House tonight, but to Māori who obviously have taken a great interest in this particular piece of legislation, and I think will continue to. And so I've risen to take a couple of calls because I think that this is an incredibly important piece of legislation, and I would appreciate if the Minister has considered those two particular issues, whether or not he and his officials can provide some advice to the House. Thank you.
Before I hear anyone else, I am going to refer the member, and I should have probably done it a little bit more quickly, to Speaker's Rulings 37.4 and probably 38.5, where the member suggested that the court could be colluding with the government. I think that is a reflection on a court. It is a reflection on a court and something which members are not meant to do. People can talk about decisions of courts. They can talk about the law, but they can't suggest that judges collude or are directed by the government. Nuk Karako.
I move that the question be now put.
Peter Paraone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look,